In my previous life, my husband concealed the family history of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis (ALS) and refused to have a premarital medical examination. After we got married, my husband started to show symptoms and eventually became paralyzed in bed. When our son became an adult, he also got the disease. I took care of both of them without complaint for most of my life. Until my 60th birthday. I accidentally overheard my husband talking to Ivy on the phone. Ivy, I've known I had this disease since I was a child. I just couldn't bear to let you suffer. So I didn't marry you. My son also spoke up. Mom, Ivy. When are you coming? I miss you so much. In despair and breakdown, I was reborn. When I saw Ivy trying every means to marry Blake, I made room for them overnight. One after being reborn and going back to high school, I went to acknowledge my relatives as soon as possible. My biological father is the chairman of Shun Peng Group. In my previous life, my 80-year-old father didn't come to find me until I was nearly 60. He told me that I was swapped by the midwife right after I was born. It was when the child, the one they thought was me, had an entrance physical examination at the age of 6 that he found the blood type didn't match. After further tests, they knew that the child they had been raising wasn't their biological one. For more than 50 years, he had been desperately looking for my whereabouts. And my biological mother had also passed away, depressed because of this matter. The process of acknowledging my relatives was very smooth. After all, by now, my biological father had been looking for me for more than 10 years. I came to the downstairs of the headquarters of Shun Peng Group and explained the situation to the receptionist. A receptionist immediately arranged for someone to take me for a paternity test. After all, this had been going on for more than 10 years. And they were already quite experienced. From the test to getting the report and then meeting my biological parents, the whole process took less than an hour. Unlike my previous life when my father was faltering, the father in front of me was tall and strong. My mother held me carefully, and her makeup was ruined by crying. I gently patted my mother on the back and said, "Mom and Dad, I have to go back to school." My parents thought it would take some effort for me to acknowledge them, but they didn't expect me to accept all this so calmly. They sent me back to school with relief. As I passed by the school toilet, I happened to run into Blake, my husband in the previous life. The surrounding classmates burst into laughter. "Arya is here to check up on him again? Blake just went to the toilet. You don't have to follow him so closely, do you?" I glanced at them and said, "I'm not following him." Not only the classmates around, but even Blake didn't believe it. "Come on, Arya. Last time on the beach, Ivy really couldn't find anyone to help, so I helped her apply sunscreen. It's normal for classmates to help each other. Why do you have to make a big deal out of it?" With his mention, I remembered that this had indeed happened in my previous life. "So you helped her apply it all over her body, including private parts?" Blake looked quite justified. "Of course. Sunscreen should be applied all over the body to be effective." Ivy ran over from somewhere and accidentally stepped on me. "Arya, I'm sorry. I asked Brother Blake to help me apply sunscreen. You know, my skin is very delicate. It hurts a lot when exposed to the sun. I really couldn't find anyone to help, so I asked Brother Blake to do it. If you want to blame someone, blame me. It has nothing to do with Brother Blake." As she said this, her tears fell. Blake felt so sorry for her that he quickly wiped her tears. But Ivy's tears flowed more and more. And finally, she ran out with grievance. Blake glared at me and chased after her in a hurry. "It's all your fault. You're making a fuss over such a trivial matter." To the class bell rang, but the two of them came back to the classroom very late. Looking at Blake, his clothes were in a mess. Then looking at Ivy, although her clothes were still relatively neat, there were faintly some mottled white and no liquids on her school uniform pants. When the classmates in the class saw this scene, they started to make an uproar. Their eyes were shining with the light of watching a good show, and they all looked at me in unison. After all, everyone knew that I had been chasing Blake for 3 whole years. And just a few days ago, I finally became his girlfriend. But who could have thought that now he was involved with another girl? The good show that everyone was looking forward to didn't play out as expected. I kept my head down the whole time, focused on the questions in my hand, and didn't even bother to give them a single glance. Seeing that I didn't react at all, Blake's face darkened, and he returned to his seat with a gloomy face. As soon as the class bell rang, I walked straight to the playground. Today is the school sports meeting, and I signed up for the shot put competition. Blake didn't like the smell of sweat on me. In my previous life, I hardly exercised, and over time, my health got worse. But even though I was in poor health at that time, I still took good care of him who was bedridden. I always idly thought that in the world of love, as long as I gave enough, I would surely get corresponding returns. I was so stupid. From beginning to end, the only one I moved was myself. In this life, I'm determined to pick up my old hobbies. Well, it starts with participating in the school sports meeting. Blake bought water for the athletes in the base camp and specially bought a cup of milk tea for Ivy. Ivy pretended to be angry and said, "Brother Blake, you know I'm on a diet. But you still buy me milk tea. You're so mean." The number of water and milk tea bought seemed to be carefully counted. Coincidentally, when it was almost my turn, they were just all distributed. Regarding this, I just calmly opened my thermos cup and took a few sips. It doesn't matter. I lived to such an old age in my previous life, and I've long lost interest in milk tea and ice water. Even in the hot summer, I'm used to carrying a thermos cup with me. Ivy seemed to notice me at this moment and said in a faint surprise, "Arya, why don't you drink what Brother Blake bought? Are you still angry?" As soon as Blake heard this, he shouted at me impatiently, "Arya, have you had enough? You've been pulling a long face since yesterday. Who are you showing it to?" I slightly raised my head and looked at him in surprise. "You've been observing me?" As soon as Blake heard this, he jumped up and down in a hurry and shouted, "Who's observing you? I don't like you at all. You're the one who insists on pestering me." Although I already knew the result, when I heard him say these words with my own ears, my heart still felt like being hit hard, and a sharp pain hit. I took a deep breath slowly, trying to suppress the surging pain in my heart, and said in a calm voice as much as possible, "Fine. Let's break up." When Ivy heard this, a flash of light instantly appeared in her eyes. On Blake's face, a look of panic flashed first. And then he shouted angrily, "Why do you think you can be together and break up whenever you want?" Before I could say anything more, Blake ran away angrily. I really don't want to entangle with him anymore. I'll find an opportunity to make everything clear. At this moment, all I can think about is focusing on the current competition. Although I haven't exercised much in recent years, I still have some of the foundation I laid before high school. I actually got the third place in the shot put event, although it was only the third place. For someone who hadn't exercised for a long time, this was undoubtedly a great affirmation and encouragement. Returning with the honor of winning the award, many classmates looked at me with more admiration and respect in their eyes. However, Blake frowned, looking displeased, and strode towards me. Without a word, he directly stuffed a cup of milk tea into my arms. "It's just a cup of milk tea. Is this worth you breaking up with me? Don't say such nonsense in front of Ivy next time. She's so blame oneself that she's almost crying." After saying that, he turned around and left in a hurry without looking back. When I returned to the dormitory, the screen of my phone suddenly lit up. It turned out that Ivy had sent me a message, along with an audio file. The content of the message was short and straightforward. "Arya, in this life, I will never give Blake to you." Seeing this message, I suddenly understood. No wonder Arya had seemed like a completely different person recently. So she had also been reborn. But in the previous life, she also knew about the genetic ALS in Blake's family. Ivy was reborn but still eager to marry Blake. Either she was truly in love with Blake, or although she was reborn, she only had memories before Blake got sick. But no matter which one it was, if she wanted Blake, that was exactly what I wanted. I casually clicked on the audio file, and I knew right away what it was. The audio started with some blushing smacking sounds, faintly mixed with some ambiguous water sounds. Then came the rapid breathing of a man and a woman intertwined. The woman's voice became louder and more intense, accompanied by the man's passionate gasps. After a while, their intermittent conversation also slowly came through. Baby. You're amazing. I love you the most. Then why? Just now. You didn't want to break up with Arya? I'm just playing around with her. I'm serious about you. After that, there were only screams and slapping sounds left. I casually forwarded the audio to the class group and mentioned Ivy. The class group exploded immediately. For Ivy. You don't need to send me this kind of thing in the future. I've already broken up with Blake. High school life is dull. And as soon as the audio was sent to the class group, it caused a stir. Slightly hard. To show respect. God. This voice. This acting. I beg you to enter the porn industry. Pausing my phone. Guys. I'll be away for a while. Blake kept sending me private messages, urging me to withdraw the message quickly. Seeing that I didn't respond, he started calling me frantically. I simply turned off my phone and started doing math problems. I thought that the next day, the two of them would surely come to question me. But Blake seemed indifferent. It was Ivy who had red and swollen eyes, clearly having cried for a long time. As for the other classmates, although they didn't say anything, the expressions on their faces, trying to hold back their laughter, clearly showed that they were secretly enjoying it and waiting to watch a good show. Of course, there were also some troublemakers who deliberately went up to Ivy. Teacher Ivy. How amazing is Brother Blake. Look. He's made your eyes so swollen from crying. Ivy's face turned red instantly. She turned around and ran out of the classroom crying. She was nowhere to be seen for the whole afternoon. This was fine. I finally got some peace. But who knew that after the evening self-study, Blake actually stopped me at the classroom door. Because of what happened yesterday. Ivy cried all night and didn't sleep a wink. I'm magnanimous and won't argue with you about that. But you must apologize to Ivy. After all, she's a girl with a thin skin and cares about her reputation. When I heard this, I was both angry and amused. She cares about her reputation? Then why did she send me the recording of your affair? Blake gave me a dirty look and pouted, saying, she's just being a little girl. Why do you have to argue with her about this? Anyway, you have to apologize to her. And you also have to give her the recommended admission quota. As long as you do as I say, I'll compensate you for the rest of the losses. Don't worry. Give the recommended admission quota to Ivy? Hearing this, I immediately understood. No wonder they didn't give me much trouble today. They were waiting for me here. In my previous life, I gave up the recommended admission quota, thinking of letting Blake have it. But he immediately gave that quota to Ivy. This time, no matter what, I won't give away my future to anyone again. Thinking of this, when Blake wasn't paying attention, I took off running and stomped on his foot hard. Where did you wholesale your confidence from? Who wants your compensation? 5 After that, I continued to study as usual. I've always had excellent academic performance. Everyone knew that the recommended admission quota was as good as mine. However, when the recommended admission list came out, my name wasn't on it. I was extremely anxious and quickly went to ask the head teacher about the situation. The head teacher looked at me with a worried expression, but his face was full of confusion. Didn't you give up on the system yourself? I was wondering why you suddenly changed your mind. I tried to hold back my panic, quickly took out my phone, and logged into the school's official website again. On the page, several big characters were particularly eye-catching. Confirmed to give up. My hands started to tremble uncontrollably. Someone must be playing tricks behind my back. I looked at the recommended admission list again. This time, I saw Ivy's name on it. In an instant, everything became clear. I found Ivy on the playground. She was passionately kissing Blake at that time. I walked up quickly and roughly pulled Ivy away. Blake was startled by this sudden scene. When he saw it was me, a proud expression flashed across his face. Arya, you said you didn't care about me. Before he could finish, I interrupted him mercilessly. Ivy, did you mess with the recommended admission list? Ivy's body trembled slightly, and she said timidly, Arya, didn't you promise Brother Blake to voluntarily give up the recommended admission quota? I saw that you've been studying so hard recently. I thought you didn't look highly on the recommended school and wanted to take the college entrance examination to get into University A. Right? I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. I gritted my teeth and asked word by word. So, Blake, Raquel, Ivy, did you tamper with my confirmation information for the recommended admission? Seeing that the matter had been exposed, Blake no longer tried to hide it. So what if we did? Ivy is different from you. Ivy wants to keep studying. Anyway, I'll marry you as soon as you graduate. What does it matter if you study or not? Hearing his shameless words, the anger in my heart finally burst out, and I started to curse. Who wants to marry a good-for-nothing like you? Who do you think you are? I didn't bother to talk to him anymore and immediately called the police. 6. When you learned that I had called the police, Blake became extremely anxious, running around in a frenzy. Arya, is this really necessary? I've already promised to marry you. What more do you want? Ivy beside him had her eyes red from crying. She sobbed and said, Arya, this recommended admission quota is really crucial to me. I won't fight with you for Brother Blake anymore. Okay? Please let me off this time. Fortunately, the police arrived very quickly. Before they could continue making a scene, the police were already there. I handed the recording of the conversation between us just now to the police. When they heard the recording playing, Blake and Ivy turned pale. With conclusive evidence, they had nothing to argue about. They just lowered their heads and remained silent. The police interrogated them carefully and then took them away in accordance with the law. After learning the truth of the matter, the school revoked Ivy's recommended admission quota. Since the final confirmation time of the system had passed, I still couldn't obtain the recommended admission qualification. At this time, there were only 4 months left until the college entrance examination. At the moment, I had no choice but to grit my teeth and study desperately. I don't necessarily have to thrive in the sun, but I must turn the situation around against the wind. After countless days and nights of hard work and unremitting efforts, I finally reaped the rewards. The moment I received the college admission notice, the emotions that had been pent up in my heart for a long time burst out like a flood breaking through a dike and could no longer be controlled. In my previous life, because of my momentary foolishness, I gave up the recommended admission quota, didn't take the college entrance examination, and rushed to work. At that time, I was ignorant, thinking that Blake's promise to me was my lifelong reliance. Blake did marry me as promised. At that time, I was so touched, thinking that I was the happiest person in the world. When it came to the premarital medical examination, he made all sorts of excuses. No matter how I persuaded him, he firmly refused. Honey, the physical examination is of great importance to you, to me, and to our future children. This is a manifestation of being responsible for our future. Why are you so reluctant? I was full of doubts and confusion at that time, trying to reason with him. You just don't trust me. If that's the case, we might as well not get married. He unreasonably threw such a sentence and turned to leave. To soothe his inexplicable emotions, I was really stupid enough to agree not to have a premarital medical examination. It was not until I was 60 years old that I learned the truth. He had long known that he had amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, so he was determined not to go for the physical examination. His approaching me from the beginning was a carefully planned hoax. He needed a free Annie who could take meticulous care of his daily life and help him bear the burden of life. He needed someone who was willing to endure hardship for the woman he loved. And I, this love-struck fool, happened to be the perfect candidate in his eyes. I gently stroked the admission notice in my hand. The real touch made me truly feel that in this life, my destiny would really be completely different from that of the previous life. I carefully put away the admission notice, and then took a taxi to the graduation party. 7. As soon as I stepped into the hotel, I saw Blake and Ivy smiling all over their faces, making toasts everywhere. If one didn't know better, they might think this was their wedding banquet. I gently nudged my roommate sitting next to me with my elbow. What are they up to? My roommate slightly leaned over and whispered in my ear. I heard that someone in our school was admitted to University A. Everyone guesses it should be the two of them. I'm annoyed just looking at them. I really don't understand why University A would accept such people. I'm really disillusioned with prestigious schools. The class commissary also came over and chimed in. The college entrance examination only filters out poor students. Not scoundrels. Just let it go. By the way, which university did Arya get into? The classmates around knew about the incident of Ivy tampering with my recommended admission information. And they didn't dare to rashly ask me how I did in the exam. In case I didn't do well, it would be like deliberately poking at my heart. Since the class commissary had asked, everyone pricked up their ears, curiously waiting for my answer. Just as I was about to speak, someone shouted loudly, "The chairman is here." The chairman is the person in charge of Shunping Group, well known in the business world. At the same time, he is a shareholder of our high school and has considerable say in school affairs. Of course, he is also my father. Everyone stood up to greet him. But he ignored the greetings around him and just kept looking around. The anxiety in his eyes seemed to indicate that he was eagerly looking for someone. I knew in my heart that he was looking for me. So, I quickly waved vigorously at him. My father's eyes lit up immediately. He quickened his pace and came straight to the empty seat next to me and sat down. As the saying goes, one becomes timid when approaching home. Sitting next to me, my father was at a loss for a moment. Not knowing where to start, he just silently picked up his chopsticks and kept picking up food for me. Seeing this scene, others couldn't help but look at each other, their eyes full of doubt and curiosity, secretly guessing when I had become so familiar with the chairman. Sure enough, some people were green with envy. My father got up to answer a phone call because of something urgent. As soon as he left, Ivy said in a sarcastic tone, "I knew it. How could anyone look down on Brother Blake? So she's found a rich backer. Look at his age. He's old enough to be her father. She really isn't picky." Although Blake didn't say anything, the serious angry look on his face clearly showed his agreement with Ivy's words. I found their words funny in my heart, but I didn't bother to argue with them. Anyway, hadn't so felt way I'd say. My father would be back soon. He would naturally explain my relationship with him to everyone at that time. Why should I waste my breath here? Not long after, my father came back from the phone call. As before, after sitting down, he continued to lower his head and pick up food for me, as if no one else was around. At this time, the principal cleared his throat and said loudly, "Dear students, there is a very outstanding student in our class who has been admitted to University A. This is a great honor for our school since its establishment. Let's give this outstanding student a warm round of applause to express our congratulations." However, none of the students present clapped. They just sat quietly. And the atmosphere became a bit awkward for a while. Only Blake and Ivy clapped vigorously. Their applause was particularly conspicuous in the relatively quiet space. While clapping, Blake also shouted at the top of his voice, "Great! Great! This student is really outstanding." The principal, standing on the stage, felt embarrassed. He frowned, raised his voice, and said, "What's going on? Everyone? Where are the applause?" Under the principal's urging, some perfunctory applause finally rang out sparsely. But Blake was still very enthusiastic in showing support. "Principal, this student is really the first one since our school was founded. Is there any special reward from the school?" Ivy quickly chimed in beside him. "I heard that the school next door gives each student who gets into University A reward of 100 yuan. Our school shouldn't offer less than that, right?" The principal, who had been a bit relieved because someone was actively responding, turned livid the moment Ivy mentioned the 100 yuan reward amount. It would be better if she just shut up. The principal had to force a smile and say with a laugh, "Don't worry, students. There will definitely be a bonus. But the specific amount still needs to be determined enter a follow-up meeting by the school. Please be patient." Seeing that the principal was in a difficult situation, my father immediately spoke up to help him out. "Everyone, don't worry. It depends on how much the school can allocate at that time. If it's not enough, our board of directors will make up the amount for this student. It will definitely not be less than 100 yuan. You can rest assured." Hearing this, The surrounding students didn't have any special reaction. It was still a calm atmosphere. On the contrary, Blake and Ivy were laughing so hard that they could hardly straighten up. Seeing them laughing so happily, the principal was relieved and spoke again. Dear students, I'd like to take this opportunity to give you one last lesson. On the path of life, we should be happy to cheer and clap for others' success. Just like Blake and Ivy. When Arya got into University A, they were happier than anyone else. This kind of open-mindedness is worthy of all of us to learn from. When Blake and Ivy heard this, they were stunned and exclaimed in unison. Wasn't it Blake Ivy who got into University A? No, it wasn't. The smiles on Blake and Ivy's faces didn't disappear, but instead transferred to the faces of the classmates. This time, all the students in the room cheered. Goodness! It was Arya who got into University A. I knew it. Those two didn't look like they could get into University A at all. Exactly. I didn't even want to clap just now. Hearing the deafening applause, the principal was so moved that he shed tears. His last lesson wasn't in vain after all. Just then, ye mud on a woe sigh. My father slowly stood up, swept his eyes across the audience, and then cleared his throat. Everyone waited quietly for what was to come. Taking this opportunity, I'd like to explain something to everyone. Arya is my child who I've been separated from for many years. We just got reunited some time ago. Over the years. Thank you to all the school leaders, teachers, and classmates for your care and attention to Arya. Today, it's on me. You can order whatever you want. The students were so shocked that they couldn't speak. It took them a while to react, and they were all extremely happy for me. Of course, while some were happy, others were sad. I was waiting for my father to pick me up at the hotel entrance as he drove from the garage. Blake ran over and questioned. You're the chairman's daughter. Why didn't you tell me such an important thing? I just found it funny. Why should I tell you? Would it make any difference? Would you leave Ivy and fall in love with me immediately? Your love is too cheap and meaningless to me. Blake was unconvinced and grabbed my hand. You've always liked me, right? Why don't you like me suddenly? I tried hard to shake off his hand but couldn't. Suddenly, heading for Feldmay, a figure rushed over and started punching Blake. It took me a while to see who it was. It was Owen. Owen was the child who was swapped with me by the midwife. He was a boy and was found not to be from the Owen family during the entrance physical examination at the age of 6. Because he was a boy, everyone thought the child from the Owen family who was swapped was also a boy, which added a lot of difficulty to the Owen family's search for their real child. The Owen family's attitude towards Owen had always been contradictory. On the one hand, they thought he was enjoying the life that should have been mine and didn't treat him well. On the other hand, they also thought he was just an innocent child. Since I returned to the Owen family, Owen had been very well behaved and never caused me any trouble. So, considering that he didn't make trouble, everyone tacitly allowed him to stay in the Owen family. Now that he was standing up for me and beating Blake, I was quite surprised. Not long after I returned to the Owen family, Blake came to the door. Arya, I was wrong before. I let you down. This time, let me pursue you properly. I'll treat you as well as you treated me before. Looking at his bruised face saying these words, I felt nauseous. Just as I was about to curse, I was interrupted by his phone ringing. Ivy's voice came from the phone. Brother Blake, my stomach hurts so much. I'm in the hospital now. Can you come and accompany me? Blake was very hesitant. I waved my hand impatiently, signaling him to go to the hospital quickly. I didn't want to see him for another second. Before leaving, Blake said reluctantly, Arya, when I come back from the hospital, I'll take you to watch a movie. Wait for me at home obediently. I didn't respond and directly reached out to slam the door shut. Then, let out a low sigh. I immediately told butler James, don't let Blake and Ivy in from now on. I don't want to see them again. Understand? After giving the order, I started idly scrolling through my WeChat moments. While scrolling, I noticed someone. Out of curiosity, I clicked in and saw that it was Ivy. In the photo was Ivy's seemingly pale and slender hand with a needle stuck in it. Her hand was gently placed on Blake's hand. and Blake seemed tired and fell asleep beside the hospital bed. The photo was accompanied by a caption, "I got into the hospital because of menstrual cramps." He insisted on staying with me. I rolled my eyes in disdain. Just as I was about to block her, I heard a sneer from the side. I looked up and saw Owen approaching with a playful smile on his face. "Sis. Do you know this Ivy?" "Yeah, having fulfilled my obsession. She's my classmate." As soon as Owen heard this, he became excited and started chattering to me. "I have a buddy who is a well-known playboy in the circle. He has countless women around him. And this Ivy is one of them. Every time my buddy finishes with a woman, he pours chili oil into the condom, for fear that some woman will secretly take his body fluid to have a baby. Ivy got into the hospital this time because of that, but she actually posted on Moments saying she was in the hospital because of menstrual cramps. Isn't that funny?" I was speechless for a moment. Well, it's quite laughable. 11 I didn't see Blake throughout the whole summer vacation. But when I went to college, I met Ivy. The moment she saw me, she started cursing. "Arya. You annoying woman. How dare you seduce my boyfriend? Blake was drunk. And he kept calling your name all the time." After saying that, she lunged at me, trying to attack me. I quickly dodged aside with a swift movement. Then, let out a low sigh. It was my turn to rush forward and start punching and hitting her. What does it have to do with me that he calls my name when he's drunk? If there's a next time, it won't be as simple as me taking action. I've been keeping up with my exercise over the years, so my physical condition is quite good. After this fight, I didn't have a scratch. I waved my hand slightly, and the bodyguard, not far away, immediately understood, quickly came over and escorted Ivy out. Not long after that, news came that Blake and Ivy were getting married. I heard it was because Ivy was pregnant. Blake even sent me an invitation. I just took a casual glance and then threw it into the trash can. 12 later, I was successfully recommended for postgraduate study. After finishing my postgraduate studies, I went overseas to pursue a doctorate. After returning to China, with the support of my family, I founded a company. The next time I saw Blake was in a coffee shop. He was sitting in a wheelchair at that time. I was surprised. I didn't expect that he got sick earlier in this life than in the previous one. His eyes fell on me. His eyes slightly red. His lips trembling slightly. It seemed that there were thousands of words on the tip of his tongue. But in the end, he just managed to utter with difficulty, "Long time no see. General Manager Arya." I nodded slightly and replied calmly, "Long time no see. Blake." Just then, a figure flashed, and started scolding and hitting Blake mercilessly. "Let you run around. Let you run around. I just went to do my hair for a while. And you disappeared. Turns out you ran out to flirt with others. Look at what you look like now. A cripple. Who would fancy you? Only I'm kind-hearted and stick by you." Blake hugged his head with both hands, his body trembling slightly, not daring to make a sound. This voice was so familiar. It seemed to be Ivy, who had a furious look on her face just now, instantly changed into a smiling expression when her eyes met mine. Oh, it's General Manager Arya. I was wondering who it was. I often see you on TV. You're really a model of a successful female entrepreneur. You're so well preserved. You look exactly the same as you did in high school." Ivy had changed a lot. She had gained a little weight, and her words had become much more sophisticated. My eyes inadvertently fell on a little boy around 6 or 7 years old beside her. The child was cute and obedient, standing there quietly. "Is this your child?" "Yes," having fulfilled my obsession. "Son, why not a low sigh? Quickly greet General Manager Arya." Although Blake and Ivy were quite something, the child seemed nice. I casually mentioned, "Take the child for a physical examination too. If he really inherits his father's disease, early detection can lead to early prevention." Ivy, however, waved her hand indifferently, still smiling. "Don't worry. My child has nothing to do with Blake. He's perfectly healthy." I was shocked in my heart, but didn't show it on my face. I casually glanced at Blake. He was lowering his head, his hands tightly gripping the armrests of the wheelchair, the veins on the back of his hands slightly bulging. Anyway, heavyweight. This matter had nothing to do with me anymore. I got up and prepared to leave. Ivy was still as enthusiastic as ever, smiling and saying to me, "Come and visit me when you have time." 13 As I stepped out of the coffee shop, the fresh air rushed towards me. Owen had already parked the car steadily by the roadside. Seeing me come out, he quickly got out of the car, greeted me with a big smile, and opened the back seat door for me. After I got in and sat down, he didn't start the car immediately. Instead, he turned his head and looked curiously at the coffee shop, his face full of a gossipy expression. "Sis, I had ought a low sigh. That Ivy is your classmate, right? Let me tell you. When you just started college, she was already pregnant. Do you know who the father of the child is? He's a rich man in his 50s. After she got pregnant, she didn't tell anyone. Instead, she secretly found a place to give birth, planning to go to the rich man's door to ask for child support in the future. As a result, when she went to his door, the rich man had suddenly died of an illness not long ago. At that time, all of the rich man's inheritance had already been inherited by his wife. Of course, the rich man's wife wouldn't recognize Ivy's child. She directly had Ivy and her child thrown out mercilessly. I was already used to Owen knowing such detailed inside information. He didn't have any other hobbies on weekdays. He was just particularly fond of these gossip news. In our circle, he was like a know-it-all. At the moment, he was looking at me expectantly, with an expression like a primary school student waiting for the teacher's praise. From the test to getting the report and then meeting my biological parents, the whole process took less than an hour. Peace, then what? Ivy married Blake with the child. Did he agree to it? Owen was waiting for me to ask this. He excitedly raised his voice and said, "Blake didn't know that the child wasn't his." Seeing the puzzled look on my face, Owen became even more complacent and continued to talk animatedly. After Ivy was kicked out by the rich man's wife, she immediately went to Blake. She cried to Blake, saying that she loved him so much that she was afraid he wouldn't agree to having the child, so she didn't tell him even when she was pregnant. Instead, she secretly gave birth to the child. However, as the child grew up, he looked less and less like Blake, and not even much like Ivy. Blake became suspicious. So he secretly did a paternity test and then found out that the child wasn't his at all. He got angry at that time and wanted to divorce Ivy. But Ivy wouldn't agree. She clung to him desperately, and they just couldn't get divorced. So, they quarreled every day, and the house was in chaos. After a fierce argument, Blake suddenly fainted. When they sent him to the hospital for an examination, it turned out to be amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. After that, he could no longer stand up. I thought to myself, could it be that the huge emotional fluctuations led to his earlier onset of the disease? Later, the next news I heard about the two of them was in a local news report. A news said that in a certain community, a man with paralyzed legs, unable to endure his wife's daily beatings, finally chose to commit suicide by burning charcoal. All 3 members of their family died from carbon monoxide poisoning. I shook my head, feeling mixed emotions in my heart. After a moment, I collected my thoughts and refocused on my work at hand. The end of the full text.